Growing up, there was a kid I knew, and his name was Percy. He was quiet and super ridiculously smart. He played soccer, always took the advanced math classes, and was an all-around nice guy. In school, I sat by him in almost every class, and we knew each other and were friends ever since we were little kids. We grew up in the same neighborhood, which I would say I knew him pretty well. And then, in middle school, he missed class for like a week. It was super weird. I figured he was sick or something, but when he came back, the teacher was asking him all kinds of questions about the palace and flying across the Atlantic Ocean, and those guys with the tall fuzzy hats, like, do they actually not flinch for anything? And so I asked him, hey man, did you like go on a trip or something? He said, yeah, I went back home to England. And I was like, wow, I wish my parents were that cool and took us back to cool places. But then I'm actually not from England. And then I said, wait, you're from England? It turns out he was born there and moved to America when he was 2 years old. How is that even real? I had known this guy most of my life in school, and I had no idea of this information about him. Because here's the thing, you can sometimes know somebody and not really know them all at the same time. You can hang out with people and still not have a ton of people who know the real you or who get the real you. For example, have you ever dealt with something or felt like something and you simply decided to keep it to yourself because you didn't think that the people around you would understand? Or did you share it and you felt like the people you talked to were just kind of sitting there with blank looks on their faces? For most of us, our friends are probably the people who get us the most. And some of you may say that you have a bestie who totally gets you all together, and that's awesome, but that's probably not most of us. Here's a stat. I made it up, but I think it's true. The majority of people don't feel like there's anyone who gets us 100%. A lot of times, we share parts of our lives with different people, the parts of our life that we feel like they'll get. We have friends that go deep with us, but some friends that we only laugh and have fun with, because they probably wouldn't get all of the deep stuff, and so we just laugh together. We have people that we hang out with, but we don't talk about sports with them. It seems like they have no interest in sports, and so we wouldn't even get into it. Or maybe there are people you know that they like sports, and so when you're around them, that's all you talk about. You talk about how your dad and your grandpa, you love baseball and basketball, and they taught you all the things that you know, and that dominates most of your conversation. We have people in our small groups that we feel comfortable with talking about our faith. We don't talk about our faith with certain people at school or in certain friend groups, I'm assuming, because we don't feel like they'll get it. And this is totally normal, but sometimes it would be nice if people just understood us, if more people understood us. All our quirks, our interests, our struggles, our fears, but instead, most of the time, it feels like nobody gets us. And you know who else feels that way? Literally everybody, almost everybody. The truth is that nobody gets me or nobody knows the real me. That feeling, it isn't easy. It's one of the reasons that this idea of personal matters so much. Because whether you knew this or not, you were actually wired to be known. You were made to have somebody who gets you, who understands you, who knows what your real world is actually like. And this, my friends, brings us back to a guy named Zacchaeus. Last week, we started talking about this encounter that Jesus had with a man named Zacchaeus. In this section of the Bible, it's the New Testament, there are eyewitness accounts of people who saw Jesus personally. And those accounts are called the Gospels. There's 4 of them. And they all come from different perspectives. They all didn't share the same stories. Sometimes they were writing to different people, which affected the details that they included. But here's what I mean. The Gospel of Luke is the only gospel that tells us the story of Zacchaeus. And there's a reason for that. Luke was writing to a mostly non-Jewish audience. The first followers of Jesus were Jewish, and so they kind of figured that everyone who followed Jesus would also have to be Jewish, but that's not the way that Jesus operates. He was for anyone from any background, and so it was natural for the not Jewish people to feel like they didn't quite fit in. So, in Luke's gospel, there are a lot of stories about people who didn't feel like they fit in. And it's easy to imagine that these are the people Luke wrote about because these are the people Luke wrote to. He wanted his readers to see how Jesus treated people just like them. And so Luke shares the story of Zacchaeus, who, like we learned last week, was on the outside of the group. He was a Jewish tax collector, which was a super bad thing to be. The short version, he was a sellout, a traitor. But then Jesus comes to town, and everyone is dying to see him, but By this point, Jesus was way famous and people wanted to know, is he like the rumors say he is? Is he really healing people and performing all of these miracles? Is he really challenging the powers in charge? Everyone wanted to see what Jesus was like, and Zacchaeus was no different. And so, he shows up. To get a better view of Jesus, Zacchaeus climbs a tree. He was short, so getting a higher view helped. But also, I imagine, Zacchaeus wasn't sure how Jesus would feel about a guy like him, a guy who collected taxes for the Romans and probably a little extra to keep for himself. And Jesus looked out for the poor and mistreated people, and nobody was better at mistreating them or making them poor than Zacchaeus. So, I imagine he wasn't looking to stand out. But then the craziest thing happens. Jesus looks up, he sees him, and he calls him out to come down. And then he invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house for dinner. And then Luke tells us this way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house. Luke 19:5. We hear that and think, okay, that's a little bold. Cook me dinner. I'm coming over with no warning. But in the context of this culture, it was an honor to host someone for dinner. Having someone in your home sent a message of friendship. And so Zacchaeus wasn't sitting there in the tree thinking Jesus was rude for inviting himself over. He was most likely thinking, I can't believe that Jesus would want to have dinner with me. And he announced it loud enough for everyone in the crowd to hear. In fact, Luke writes this. So he, Zacchaeus, came down at once and welcomed him, Jesus, gladly. Luke 19:6. So why did Jesus invite himself over? Because Jesus cared about what Zacchaeus cared about. And even though it didn't seem like it on the outside, Zacchaeus cared about belonging, being accepted, being seen, being known. How do I know that? Because he was a human, and we literally all want that. And we want it more when we feel like we don't belong anywhere. Zacchaeus lived his life as an outsider. As a Jewish man, he didn't fit in with the Romans, even though he worked for them. And he didn't fit in with his Jewish neighbors because he taxed them on behalf of the Roman government. See, Zacchaeus wasn't just climbing a tree to see Jesus. This is important. He was climbing a tree to see if he mattered to Jesus, to see if Jesus knew what mattered to him. And don't miss this. It surprises everyone. People didn't expect a friendship to form between Jesus and the local outcasts. They liked Jesus and wanted to be around him, and they didn't want to be around Zacchaeus. In fact, they all probably thought that they already knew everything they needed to know about Zacchaeus. As a tax collector, they knew exactly what he was like, and they didn't need to be associated with him, but not Jesus. Jesus knew that just because Zacchaeus had the label of tax collector, it didn't tell the whole story about who he was. It turns out Jesus knew Zacchaeus better than anyone around him. Jesus understood Zacchaeus was just a person who wanted to belong. And Jesus went over to his place to show him that he did. If you've ever wondered what Jesus thinks about you, the story of Zacchaeus hopefully is an encounter or an encouragement, but maybe you've always felt like there were certain things that mattered to Jesus. For example, maybe you thought Jesus cared about your Bible, reading it, but not your grades. Or maybe Jesus really cares about praying, but not so much your friendships. Or Jesus cares about holy stuff, but not like real life stuff. Maybe Jesus cares about your cussing, but not the anxiety I have. He cares about my sexual purity, but not about my dating relationships. Today, I want you to know that the things that matter to you matter to him. The things that interest you interest him. He doesn't just know that you love basketball or K-pop or theater, but he gets why. He gets you personally. I mean, think of it this way. This is our bottom line. It's personal because Jesus knows what matters to you. I don't know about you, but that was not the image of Jesus that I grew up knowing. That's not what I thought he was like. The personal Jesus surprised Zacchaeus and definitely shocked the people around Zacchaeus. And chances are there are a lot of people around you every day who would never guess that Jesus is so interested in them personally. That's why this week, I want to challenge you to try both of these ideas. First, talk to Jesus about what matters to you. Jesus cares about you. He cares about what matters to you, so start there. Pray about it. Share it with him. Let him know what the things about you, the things that you like. Let him know the things that worry you. Tell him the things that bring you life. Talk about the things that drain you. Jesus is never bored of hearing the things about you because it's personal to him. Talk to others about what interests them. When it came to Zacchaeus, it wasn't personal for the crowd he was in. They made assumptions about Zacchaeus, but they didn't really know him or get him. but Jesus did. And he was the only one who knew what really mattered to Zacchaeus. And he helped Zacchaeus feel this sense of belonging. And it's possible that there are people that you've made assumptions about, people that you think are one way because you've believed that one thing about them, but you've never made it personal. Maybe this week, you can make it personal by just being intentional and discovering the things that others like. Let go of the ideas that you had about them and do for someone what Jesus did for Zacchaeus. In this letter to the church in Philippi, the Apostle Paul writes about this very idea. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Philippians 2:3-4. Look out for the interests of others, which might mean you ask your friends questions and listen to their answers. Or maybe you play something that your little brother loves to play. You go watch your friend play their sport, even if you have no idea what's going on. That's lacrosse for me. I don't get it at all. Maybe you make an effort to include that kid who's a grade younger than you. You get to know someone who is a little different than you are. From there, Paul goes on to talk about the character of Jesus and what Jesus was like. And Paul said this, make Jesus the model, because that's exactly what Jesus was like. He was selfless. He looked out for the interests of others, and we should do the same thing. This is what makes us stand out as people who follow him. Everybody needs somebody who knows their name and knows them personally. But I want you to think about something this week. Do you know what matters to the people around you? Really? Have you taken the time to be personal enough to try to get them? When we take the time to make it personal with others, we are living like Jesus. Jesus was never satisfied by making a judgment about a person from far away. He got close. He took time, and he never really let a label or an assumption inform his opinion. He cared about what mattered to others because they mattered to him. It's personal because Jesus knows what matters to you. Now you had the chance to go and do the same for others. Thanks so much for being here today, guys. I hope you have a great time and a great conversation in your groups today. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.